Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. Thank you all for joining us. I suppose I should start out with a confession. I'm actually not a big gamer, though I do play FIFA 19 quite a bit.
Video games are funny. What once could only be played on giant metal boxes in smelly arcades, to coming to your home in cartridges, then discs, and then downloaded from the internet. The industry has seen many leaps ahead in technology, and it seems like online streaming may be one of the directions it'll head to in the future. And why not? With movies streaming on Disney Plus and Hulu, or music streaming on Spotify, why not video games? On paper, it sounds pretty simple, but the reality is complicated. While we have several examples of the big three consoles attempting game streaming, from Xbox Game Pass, PlayStation Plus and cloud gaming on Nintendo Switch, there was one company who desired to lead this ambitious streaming future. And they gave up pretty much immediately. I'm your host for today, Lord Narrator. And in today's episode of the Gaming Gallery, we'll be discussing the history of Google Stadia. The concept of Google Stadia was relatively simple. Google servers would run whatever game you'd be playing and stream the footage to your devices. The intention was to allow anyone to play games no matter how powerful their computer was. You could have a laptop from 2012 running games made in 2020 somewhat flawlessly, assuming your laptop was always connected to the internet and wasn't prone to Wi-Fi issues or anything. Stadia wasn't the first gaming platform to take advantage of game streaming, not by a long shot. But it was the project with the most money invested into it. Google was determined to become a powerful competitor to the likes of OnLive, PlayStation Now and Xbox Game Pass. Google's belief was that their wider network of servers and data centers, and their experience with streaming platforms like YouTube would give them an advantage. Stadia would theoretically have the lowest input lag as players were more likely to live closer to a Google data center than ones used for PlayStation and Xbox. Input lag was a key factor Google wanted to take into account. During early stages of development, teams would demonstrate Doom 2016 running at 4K 60 FPS to show off the power of Stadia. To reduce input lag, Stadia's controller would connect directly to servers through Wi-Fi as opposed to whatever device the player was running their games on. Although players could use a different controller through USB cables. To help reduce input lag, the Stadia controller had a function to predict what buttons the player would press next. This didn't always work though, and players would report it causing more issues than it fixed in practice, particularly with fighting games like Mortal Kombat 11 or Samurai Showdown. Google Stadia would officially be unveiled at the Game Developers Conference 2019. An on-stage demonstration would showcase how seamless players would transfer their games between devices. With it being pointed out the computers on stage were very weak and old, but could still stream Stadia somewhat smoothly. While players would connect to Stadia on PCs and smart devices using Google's Chrome browser, a Chromecast would be used to stream gameplay to a TV. Arguably the most unique feature of Stadia would be its YouTube integration. Video game companies would be able to upload trailers for their upcoming games online, with a link embedded on end screens to take players directly to a Stadia demo. And on the flip side, players themselves could seamlessly connect their games to YouTube to begin streaming their play sessions. State shares would allow players to share links with viewers to start playing the game at the exact moment they were watching the video. An extension of state shares, called crowdplay, would enable this feature to expand to online multiplayer. Viewers watching a streamer could be placed in a waiting list to join the next lobby of the player. While state shares were one of the more exciting features confirmed for Stadia, the feature itself wouldn't actually launch with the platform until the following summer. Crowdplay also wouldn't go into beta testing until summer 2021. And even after they both launched, not every game supported state shares or crowd plays. With Google Stadia not having to rely on each player having their own console, it was said the Stadia was to be more powerful than the Xbox One X and PlayStation 4 Pro combined. 4K streaming would launch shortly after the platform's release, with plans for 8K support coming down the road. And since Stadia was already reliant on being constantly online, Google would claim it'd have the highest quality online multiplayer experience across all platforms, since all players in a session would be connected to the same Google server rather than relying on the weakest individual server in a lobby. Although this seemed a little hard to believe considering cross-platform play was also confirmed, so not everybody would be on Stadia's servers. One of the more interesting developer tools for Stadia was its style transfer technology. Using an AI system, developers would create their games in a textureless environment, then use style transfer to experiment with different art styles.
Another little-known fact is that Google makes arguably the most played game on the internet today. It's the Dino Chrome game, mostly played when there's no internet connection. Not going to talk to you about the high-quality graphics and sophistication you all are used to, but it does have a lot of players, and I probably logged more hours than I care to admit.
So, what happened? The basic answer is that Google Stadia didn't really have a good market to aim for. Gamers who wanted the highest quality graphics possible likely already had a computer that could run these games natively in better quality. And even if Stadia was the most powerful gaming platform in the world at launch, it would quickly be surpassed by the Xbox Series and PlayStation 5 less than a year later, with no promised 8K update in sight. Plus, hardcore gamers wouldn't be fully satisfied knowing no matter what, the fact alone that Stadia was a streaming service meant there'd be graphics and control issues no matter how good their internet was. And setting up a Stadia game was also too complicated for casual players. You'd have to purchase a game, oftentimes for the same $60 price as other platforms. Go through a convoluted process to get the stream started, wait for the game to connect to servers which could take a long time on slow internet speeds. Not to mention that Stadia would only work on Chrome browsers or TVs with a Chromecast connected. Smartphones would have a downloadable app, but those playing an iPhone or other Apple devices would have to wait a while for Stadia support, which had its own obnoxious system to get games running. It also doesn't help that it took Google almost 2 years to include a search bar in Stadia's store. But arguably the biggest issue was the pricing. Stadia was envisioned to be the Netflix of game streaming. But here's the problem. Services like Netflix, Hulu or Disney Plus run on a continuous subscription model. You pay the subscription and that's it. All the content is yours to enjoy. And while some movies may be locked behind an additional paywall, these were more often than not temporary. Movies initially meant for a theatrical release suddenly needing to go straight to streaming, or movies releasing alongside a theatrical release. With Stadia, you had to pay for the subscription alongside the full price for individual games. While there was a free version, it only got you so far. Keep in mind, you didn't actually own any of these games. On other platforms like Nintendo Switch or PlayStation 4, you buy a physical or digital game and it's yours forever. A digital game stays on your console even after the platform's store shuts down. But cloud gaming relied on those servers being available at all times to function. It was more like buying an overpriced rental game. It didn't belong to you. The general public was also just very skeptical of the project from the beginning. Google has a bad track record of unveiling a promising new project. And just when it looks like they'd need to make any effort to get people to care, they go silent for months before scrapping everything. And Stadia was no exception. Publishing games on Stadia was also said to be a pain for developers. Game developers couldn't just re-release the PC versions of their games onto Stadia and call it a day. They'd have to design a specific Stadia port from scratch. And while a few exclusives would be released, a majority of the lineup would be made up of games that had already been out for months, even years on other platforms. Death Stranding was originally planned to be a Stadia exclusive, but Google decided against it since it was a single-player game. And while Cyberpunk 2077 was said run the smoothest on Stadia between all consoles, it didn't make much of a difference considering everything going on with that game. Shortly after Stadia's launch, Google would go silent for months at a time, really only updating players on what free games would be offered any given month. With the later confirmations that Google would cease production on first-party games to focus on supporting the platform itself, it was only a matter of time before the entire project would go down. And sure enough, on September 2022, less than 3 years after launch, Google announced that it'd be shutting down Stadia for good. All game purchases would be refunded, although no refunds on subscriptions. Those that supported cross-platform play would be given the ability to transfer save files to another platform. Google would release its only first-party title, Worm Game, a few days before the service was discontinued as a thank you to supporters. And in January 2023, Google Stadia was dead.
Welcome to Stadia. We are so excited by this. To do this well, it's important that we have the right people working on this, experts with deep history and heritage in games. That starts with Phil Harrison, who joined us about a year ago. He's a great leader and a great gamer. Definitely someone who knows the difference between RPGs and NPCs.
But did it have to be this way? Could we have lived in a world where Google Stadia was the most successful gaming platform of all time? Probably not. But they did have a chance in 2020 to really grow into something more. While the world was busy staying inside for some reason, the gaming industry was seeing its highest growth in consumers. Google could have capitalized on this, especially with the global chip shortages making it difficult for gamers to purchase a PlayStation 5 or Xbox Series. But the most they did was offer more free subscriptions, which not many people kept for the long term. With Google Stadia dead, is that it for game streaming? I think it's fair to say that while the world isn't quite ready for a dedicated streaming service, there's still a place for it in today's industry. With Xbox Game Pass allowing players to stream games between their Xbox and PCs. And most notably, PlayStation Plus allowing gamers to stream PS3 games to their modern consoles. It's safe to say that while it'll likely never replace traditional gaming, streaming isn't going away anytime soon.
Thank you very much for gathering around with all of us today. With Stadia, we can all dream bigger and together build a playground for every imagination. Thank you.
That's all for today, but don't forget to check out our other gaming galleries. We've got lots of fun topics to choose from, so there's probably something here you'd be interested in. If you'd like to hear more of my voice, outside of using Google Translate, you can check out my Let's Play of Bubsy on screen. Granted, I only ever made the one video and don't plan on going any further than that, but it was still a fun time. I've been your host, Lord Narrator. And remember that in our hearts, we are gamers.